Hello there and welcome. This is Mikhail or Michael speaking, and as always, I want to express my eternal gratitude towards those who decided to support me financially, be it through Patreon, PayPal, or Super Thanks. I really appreciate your generosity, so thank you friends and have a blessed day. Today's video, we will start with the Seversk frontline. So as you can see, here is the city of Seversk that serves as a logistical hub for this entire front line and for which Russians have been fighting for a long time. Now as you can see, the Kreminna-Liman front line is extremely close to it. We will touch it later. There are some territorial changes in this sector, and they happened here near the settlement of Belagorovka. The situation generally was such that Russians tried to take control over it first by directly attacking, which did not bring them much success, and then they decided to go around in a pincer maneuver. At some point in time they were able to advance both on the north and to the south of the settlement. However, at some point these advancements bugged down. Recently Russians resumed their assault in the direction of Belagorovka, and as a result of that they were able to significantly advance on the front line and initiate the fight for the settlement itself. So, as a result of a successful Russian attack, Russians were able to take this much territory. So this is the result of that attack. Now, if you look closely, you will see that here is the first tree line. Here is the open field in the middle, and another tree line, the last one that is covering Belagorovka itself. So Russians advanced from their positions within these trees and were able to take control over the Ukrainian trenches located in these forest lines. While we here, let's visit the Serebryansky forest and general Kreminna-Liman frontline. Situation over the last few days here was dynamic, but results were minor. For example, both Ukrainians and Russians were extremely active here on this frontline, with Russians counterattacking within the Serebryansky forest, as well as from Dibrova. And from this salient, they were assaulting Ukrainian positions in the direction of Torske and Zarichne, as well as assaulting in the direction of Yampalivka and Terny. Here in this sector, Ukrainians are actively defending and counter-attacking Russians whenever they can. For example, there are no territorial changes on this front, but there are reports that here Ukrainians were able to successfully counterattack in the direction of Dibrova, and as a result of that attack, this is how much territory they captured in this sector. As you can see, this is not much. However, now Ukrainians are at least one field away from the settlement of Dibrova, which perhaps could allow them to attack it directly. But as you can see, this entire salient is problematic for the Ukrainian forces in this sector because they are very open to the flank attacks by the Russians. Whether this was a one-time operation or this is a sign of something bigger, only time will tell. Generally, there were reports of Russian assaults that were successful here in this sector. There are no territorial changes to report as of yet. However, recent reports suggest that Russians were able to advance here in this sector and take several strong points of the Ukrainian forces. And I have an interesting video for you where you can see Russian forces assaulting Ukrainian positions within the tree lines. So again, the general situation here on this front line is extremely dynamic. There are a lot of Ukrainian attacks and Russian counterattacks, as well as Russian attacks and Ukrainian counterattacks. While all this happening, both Russian and Ukrainian artillery is tangled in a dual and counter battery activities. Then let's quickly visit the Russian bridgehead that they were recently able to establish and touch on that. Like I said in the previous video a few days ago, Ukrainians were successful at reinforcing this front line and were able to stop Russian advancements. Now, this doesn't mean that there is no action. On the contrary, there is a lot of fighting. Ukrainians are actively counter-attacking here in this sector in attempt to destroy this newly established bridgehead. However, it would seem that Russians too pulled some reinforcements, and at this point in time the front line is in a stalemate. Then let's visit Kupiansk front line, where territorial changes had appeared. First, let's touch the situation around Liman Pershi. Here, Russians are not only advancing in attempt to take control of the entire forest here, and the control of it will allow Russians to launch attacks in the direction of several settlements one at a time, and generally advance in the direction of Kupiansk. Russians also advance in the direction of Sinikivka. However, there are no territorial changes to report. Now, where territorial changes had appeared is here, near the settlement of Persha-Travny. So, as a result of a successful Russian attack here in this sector, Russians were able to take this much territory from the Ukrainian forces. Perhaps this Russian attack is an attempt to fix some of the Ukrainian forces here and maybe even force Ukrainians to send more reinforcements to this sector in attempt to cover this front line. Because if Russians continue to advance here on this front, like in this manner, they will sooner or later end up in the outskirts of Petropavlivka. Then, as tradition implies, we have to make a stop at a Bakhmut city and take a look at the situation here. Ukrainians continued their limited attacks in the direction of Dubova-Vasilivka, settlement of Birhivka, and settlement of Yagodne. However, these assaults were unsuccessful. Then let's touch the situation on the southern flank. It has been few days and the map haven't changed at all. But that doesn't mean Ukrainians didn't try to do anything here at all. They continued their attacks all around Klishevka in attempt to re-enter the settlements and fight for it. From what I know, Russians continued to actively pull reinforcements to this sector, and this is one of the reasons why Ukrainians weren't just not able to take control over Klishevka, but were forced to retreat from the outskirts of the settlement that they actually managed to control at some point. Then from here, let's move to the FDFA Sector. Ukrainians assaulted Russian positions in and around settlement of Krasnogorovka, Veselye, Kamyanka, Opытное, and Vodyane. As a result of successful Russian counterattack, Russians were able to advance from the settlement of Kamyanka and spread zone of control around it. This is how much territory they were able to capture from the Ukrainians. Now, this Russian advance perhaps is not a show that they are going to advance further on. As you can see, there is an open field and Ukrainian positions located right in front of them. So perhaps this Russian counterattack was an attempt to save settlement of Kamyanka and stop Ukrainians from assaulting it directly. Then from here, let's move to the Marinka front. Ukrainians were on the assault here, especially from the settlement of Nivelske, and as a result of that, they were able to advance here in this sector and push Russians away from the settlements. On the other hand, Russians advanced from Opytne, and as a result of that, took this much territory from the Ukrainian forces. So, as you can see, quite literally a field. However, it is very important for the control of Opytne, because one field away means that Russians will have defensive positions in these forest lines and here, in a way creating a buffer in between their strongholds within the settlement and Ukrainian positions in the open fields. Then from here, let's move to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. Situation here remains to be difficult, mostly for the Ukrainians. For example, here you can see on the video the settlement of Staromayorsky being abandoned and many Ukrainian equipment shown being destroyed. This became a kill zone for the Ukrainian forces because as Ukrainians are leaving settlement of Makarivka and drive along this road in attempt to re-enter settlement of Staromayorsky, they are easily spotted by the Russians and fired upon. From Vremivka tactical bridgehead, let's move to the Ariha front line, and there are a lot of interesting news here too. After a failed armor assault, Ukrainians yet again try to advance within these forest lines, and as you can see on the video, Russians have no trouble spotting them and opening fire on those tree lines. Then there is another video of Russians spotting one Ukrainian tank and one BTR and opening fire on them. At some point they tried to retreat and were forced out of the forest line into the open fields, after which they were hit. At this point in time, Ukrainians are launching limited assaults in the direction of Robotina yet again, but this time these assaults are mostly infantry. In any way, this is the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please consider supporting it with a like, comment, and a subscription. As you know, those actions not only motivates me to work harder, but also helps with promotion of this video. If you feel extra generous, please consider supporting me financially on Patreon. I would really appreciate it. Thank you in advance. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a good day and always remember, Russia will be free and great.